This week we're going to be looking at Adobe InDesign. It's very similar to Illustrator, so I think you'll be able to apply a lot of what we've already learned to this program as well. This video is for the first tutorial on the grid project. I'm going to go to File, New, and show you how to get it set up. So I'm going to call this grid, and I'm going to switch it to inches and leave it at the standard 8.5 by 11 at vertical orientation. I just need one page, and I only need one column, but I just want to point this out. This is pretty cool. I can have it already insert columns for me. They're just going to show me guides. It's not going to do anything else, and choose the amount of gutter space, that's the space in between the columns. I do want to have margins that will only be 1/4 of an inch for this assignment. Okay, so this is our layout. One page, 8.5 by 11 vertical, and margin. So if you don't see that, just open that up. Margins at 1/4 inch. Just for the sake of showing you how you could switch this, I am going to switch it back to Picas to hit create. And now this is in Picas. If I wanted to switch this to inches, I could right click on here and switch it to inches.
I also want to point out that just like I had mentioned at the last tutorials in Illustrator, I am working in the Essentials Classic view, and that's why you see all of my properties up here in what's called the options bar. So if you want to have those options for your stroke and your stroke weight and fill up in here, you're going to be in the Essentials Classic. If you want to have them in the Properties panel, you'll have them in the Essentials, and that's all the same information, it's just over here. So I'm going to switch it back over to Essential Classic.
So this gives me a guide already of a 1/4 inch margin, and it starts here out at 0, which is good. If I wanted to change that so that my 0 starts where the margin is, I clicked into the corner here and I drag it out, and I'm letting it end right there at my intersecting corners for my margins. And now notice how that just moved my 0 over to here. So you could do that at any point if I want my 0 actually to start where the 1 inch starts or whatever. You probably don't, but I just wanted to illustrate that. I'm going to put it back to being over here. Sometimes you may want actually your zeros to start where the margin starts. Okay, so just like in Illustrator, if you don't have your rulers up, you're going to go up under View and choose Show Rulers. At this point, maybe you realize that having the rulers are really useful, so you might want to learn the keyboard shortcuts. Same thing with the guides. So Hide Guide and Show Guide, you have your keyboard shortcut there, and if it's on a Mac, it'll tell you what the keyboard shortcut is. So this plus sign we don't actually type in. That just means you're doing both the control and the semicolon. The first thing that we'll do is set up our boxes, and this is just going to be like in Illustrator. I'm going to use the rectangular tool, and I'm going to give it no fill. So you're going to go up here to the options bar, no fill, and a black stroke of 1. So if you don't see those options, you click on the arrow, choose the none option for the fill, the top one, and for the stroke, you're going to choose black, and then for our points, 1. And I'm not going to hold the shift key down in this example because it's actually supposed to be a rectangle, not a square. Holding the shift key down would lock the proportions. And I can see my little points there. It's telling me how large it's getting to be, and I want this to be 2.5 inches wide by 3 inches high. So I'll just move it out to be approximately, looks like my height's in Picas for some reason. I'm going to switch that. So I'll move this. I'll go up here 2.5 and switch this to 3 inches. So now I can hold the Alt key down and click and drag that out and do the same thing again. And now I probably want to start working with my guides to get exact layout or exact spacing in between my different boxes. For the sake of doing this video tutorial, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but it's pretty cool in both Illustrator and in InDesign. When I hover over a section, do you notice how it is giving me a line up here in my rulers? So I can actually kind of very quickly see, alright, these are each, they're a 1/4 inch apart, and that's exactly what I want, and I'm lining them up to the edges of my margins. So now I can select all 3 by just clicking and dragging across. They're all selected, and do the same method to duplicate them, holding the Alt key down, click and drag them down, and use my smart guides to move them over. You can also always use, oh, I think I duplicated it that time. You can always use your arrow keys as well to be able to, now I'll use my arrow keys to kind of nudge everything over. I didn't actually drag it with my mouse. And then do the same thing again, select them all, Alt, and bring them down. Okay, so obviously I have to adjust my spacing, and I'll use my arrow keys, and I'll just kind of do it, eyeballing it for right now. All right. Now the next thing is we want to set up our guides, and I asked you to have your guides every ½ inch starting at the margin. So I am going to adjust my ruler so that it starts here to just make it a little bit easier in terms of the math. So I just clicked and dragged, so now my 0 point is here, and I'll drag my guides out every ½ inch. So it's every ½ inch within the box. So now in this one I have to look at where that one starts on the ruler, so I'm not just following along on the ruler. Okay, so I have mine done, and unlike in Illustrator, they're not locked by default, so if I need to click and move them, I could select one of them and move it around. But just take a moment and just double check, did you get all of them to be a ½ inch? So it's a ½ inch starting from the edge of the box, not always just following along the ruler, so that's what we should see. Now for each one of these rows, I have you create a different grid structure. So jumping back over to Blackboard for a second, and the first one I want you to create the grid for the rows every ¼ inch, the second one every inch, and the third one every ½ inch. Okay, so go ahead and grab your rulers starting from the top and start putting them in every ¼ inch for the first one. Here's my page with my grid structure all set up, and now the next thing is to start creating the layout. So let's just switch over to my completed one here. So we're creating a layout of boxes that have a color. So each row I want you to use just 2 different colors. And that's really just because I think that switching up the color helps kind of refresh your brain juices a little bit in terms of creating new layouts. I think it's a little bit too hard if you're using the same color for everything, but also it's too easy if you switch the colors every time. Because you start to think about the relationship of, okay, in this one, what's it like if I have the magenta surrounding the cyan, in different ways. So start thinking about the boxes with their different colors as like how they relate to the other boxes with the other colors. Alright, so how do we get this all set up? Going back over here. Again, I'm just going to use that rectangular tool, and I am going to choose a color. So I'm going to go up here, and just for the sake of keeping the exercise relatively simple, we're just going to use this list of colors right here. So this is where I got my cyan, and now I'm clicking outside to close that box. I don't want to have a black box. Okay, so in your exercise I talk about create the grid and break the grid, and what do I mean by that? Let's zoom in on one square. Oh, so I inadvertently changed this one to blue because this was selected, so I have to go back. Actually, I'm just going to do Control Z and undo that. Alright, so make sure that you don't have any selected, so I'm using that arrow key to click outside so nothing is selected, and now when I can switch over to blue and no stroke, nothing changed. Okay, so I'm going to take my rectangular tool, and so thinking about a grid, you could imagine these each as if they were like their own magazine layout page. So maybe I have like my heading, a big bold heading right here in the middle, and I'm going to let that be blue. You can use that keyboard shortcut, just Control to switch to the arrow key if you want, or just actually take the key and then switch outside, so that one is not selected. So now when I switch colors, and I'm going to switch to this magenta color here and take my rectangular tool again, it won't turn this one. Okay, so maybe this is my heading, and maybe I'm going to have something underneath. So here I'm going to break the grid in the sense of I'm not going to just try to fill in these boxes. That would be really a boxy layout and really boring. So I'm breaking this grid that I set up, but I'm still aligning things to the grid. So now I'm going to work right in the middle of, and I can tweak that and move it over. Okay, so if I feel like that's not exactly right in the middle, I could move that over. And so I'm breaking this grid layout, but I'm still making things in relationship to each other because I'm simply started this in the middle of the box here. And now I could continue going ahead and putting in maybe some more red and then switch it back over. So again, I want to deselect this box before I switch my color, switch it over to the cyan, and then back to my box, my rectangle tool, and then maybe try to think, it's just going to be really boring if I just fill these in. So again, like what could I do? Maybe I want to just have like these little almost columns here, and I'll switch it again. Alright, so that's basically what the practice is. You keep going, but really kind of try to challenge yourself. Think about your margins, think about the outlines, like could you create some kind of contrast? You can also overlap things. So let me just show you that briefly. Let's say, so like for example, in the ones I created down here, didn't mean to zoom in quite that much. And some of the ones over here, I have changed the spacing. I have some boxes that are behind other boxes. I'm going to right click here and choose Arrange, Bring to Front. Oops, maybe I wasn't on the right one. There we go. Arrange, Bring to Front, and that moves it forward. So when I did this layout, I drew my darker purple boxes behind, and then I put this one on top, but I wanted to go behind. So with it selected, just right click on it and choose Arrange, Send to Back, and it changes the visible order of it. So that's another option you might want to play with. So I think that, basically thinking about everything else that we've done with Illustrator, this is very similar. You definitely, at the end of the practice though, view this without the guides. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut and check. So right here I would need to move my boxes over because I've cut off my black margin, but you'll probably find spaces where things, like right here, so zoom in on things, those boxes, the blue actually should go all the way down. This one went a little bit. So then you're going to have to spend, a little bit of time on just the touch-ups because you can't always see everything with the guides. Or just learn the keyboard shortcut for the guides, and you're going to want to be able to just kind of put them back and forth. And again, so if I go up under View, you'll see what the keyboard shortcut is. That's what all of these things that are listed over here. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. If your brain's not hurting, I'd say, while doing this exercise, then you're not really challenging yourself enough. Keep trying to come up with different interesting grid structures. Something that is interesting for you will also be interesting for me.